the most difficult scenes were when I was alone in my room with no partners, just by myself dealing with a room which was almost another character.
Hello, I'm Elena Anaya, and I'm excited to break down the summary of my movie, The Skin I Live In, and spoilers alert for those who haven't seen this masterpiece yet. Robert Legend, a well-known plastic surgeon, seeks to create an artificial skin that is resistant to burns and can also fend off insect attacks. In a medical conference, Robert presents his theories and invites his peers to participate in his research. He examines the animal blood sample he earlier took from a hospital as he goes back home. On his room, he observes the character that played Vera, his captive, on a screen. He walks into her room and is totally surprised to see that she has tried to kill herself. She is hurried to his lab, where he treats her wounds. Vera asks him how long this will go on, when she regains consciousness, but Robert ignores her. It is obvious that Robert has kept her in captivity for a long time in order to do experiments on her. Robert resided at a remote mansion, with his housekeeper Morelia, and a few other servants. In actuality, Morelia has taken care of the mansion for a very long period. Morelia gives Robert a gallon of blood during breakfast and tells him it was drawn from a living animal. After that, Robert runs several experiments on it in his lab, as he has maintained a variety of insects and blood samples in the lab for his experiments. The fake skin is then carefully removed from its culture and applied on a headless model. The skin is then transferred to Vera. He comes to the conclusion that the skin is resistant to fire and mosquitoes after conducting numerous burn and mosquito tests. At another conference, Robert asserts that he has created artificial skin that is successfully burn and bug resistant. He gave the name of a woman. Additionally, he claims that his creation will contribute to the total eradication of malaria, and assures everyone that it will also be successful on people. The chief scientist queries Robert about the moniker Gal and the specifics of skin production after his presentation. Robert responds that it is the name of his late wife who was burned severally. Robert also reveals to the experts that he combined DNA from human and pig cells to create skin that is tougher and more mosquito resistant. When the chief scientist overhears Robert speaking, he instructs him to stop his research immediately and threatens to denounce him to the board if he doesn't. Robert tells Vera that he has finished his experimentation on her when he enters her room later that night. Vera asks Robert about her future after hearing this. Then she makes him an offer to marry her and live together, which terrifies him and quickly exits her room after that. Soon after, Morelia tells Robert to dispose Vera. Vera's likeness to his deceased wife, in her opinion, may complicate situations in the future. But Robert tells her that he's not in a hurry and instead requests her to fire all the servants to hide Vera for a long time. While the staff is leaving, a man dressed as a tiger shows up at the gate. He tells Morelia that he is her son Zeka, who she hasn't seen in 10 years because of their complicated relationship. She opens the door for him and offers him food as she becomes emotional. The TV shows that a bank has been robbed. When Morelia confronts Zeka about it, Zeka admits that he was a part of the robbery. He takes it without hesitation and places the responsibility on his colleague for failing to turn off the security camera. Zeka then sees Vera's on the screen and gets attracted to her. He appears to recognize her face too. In order to find Vera, Zeka ties Morelia to a chair. He ultimately locates a room and begins to coercively approach her. Zeka tells her he's surprised to find her alive. As it turns out, mistaken her to Robert's deceased wife Gal. When Robert arrives, he discovers the housekeeper bound to a chair. On the nearby TV, he sees Zeka raping Vera. He rushes into the room, shoots Zeka, and grabs Vera in his arms out of rage. Strangely, despite the fact that Robert killed her own son, Morelia doesn't hold him responsible. What's more intriguing is that she cleans up the crime scene on her own while Robert goes outside to dispose of Zeka's body. According to Morelia, that Zeka was fathered by a co-worker, and Robert was born to Mr. Legend, who she previously worked for. No one knows that Zeka and Robert are stepbrothers. Since Mrs. Legend was unable to conceive, the family adopted Robert. She is therefore Robert's biological mother, even though he is unaware of this. Vera questioned Morelia about Zeka acting familiar to her. Morelia responds that he thought she was Gal, whom he fell in love with a long time ago. Morelia goes on to remark that Robert and Zeka had quite different upbringings. Zeka was raised as a street thug while Robert was reared in a wealthy home and went on to become a doctor. The family was content with their daughter Norma, whom Robert and his wife Gal had together. But 12 years ago, everything changed. Zeka committed a crime and showed up in their home. Morelia gave him permission to remain in the outbuilding. Zeka and Gal fell in love with each other. They both fled in a car one day, but midway they were involved in an accident. Gal was left behind as Zeka fled the car on fire. She was barely alive and had a disfigured face when Robert found her. Even though his wife had betrayed him, he still loved her and used his medical expertise to save her. Day and night, Robert took care of her, and to prevent her from seeing herself in the mirror, he even took down every mirror in the home. She made a good recovery over time, but her face was irreparably damaged. Gal overheard her daughter singing in the back. She walked over to see her daughter. She accidentally saw her face in the window reflection and lost all chance of hope. She committed suicide by leaping from the window. Her daughter Norma was permanently traumatized when her body fell in front of her, eventually committed suicide as well by jumping the same window. Vera confesses that Zeka truly harmed her earlier in the evening as she and Robert are preparing to make love. Thus, the two simply cuddle up to one another before falling asleep. Robert had a nightmare about his daughter's death. It takes place 6 years earlier, when Norma is still reeling from the shock of losing her mother. Robert and Norma go to a party one night, and then she abruptly disappears. Robert searches for her. He observes a man biking past by him. He discovers Norma, his daughter, unconscious next to a tree. Norma awakens and mistakes her father for the one who abused her and starts screaming. Robert then wakes up from the dream drenched in sweat. Vera also dreams about a guy named Vicente who works in his mother's boutique. Vicente has a crush on Cristina, who also works in that boutique, and is revealed to be a lesbian. Later on, he also goes to the same party that Robert had attended. We now see the scenario from the other perspective. Vicente first meets Norma. The two seem to enjoy each other. They are sparking off one another. They enter the garden, where they immediately begin making love. Norma starts to have panic attack and yells. When he attempts to stop her, she bites his hands. He then strikes her in the face, then fixes her clothes, before getting on his bicycle and leaving the area where Robert finds his daughter. After a month, Vicente rides his bike outside. Robert pursues him in an effort to exact revenge. Vicente's bike is wrecked by Robert after he chases him into the forest. Robert injects him sedatives, then kidnaps him to his basement. Vicente's mother is subsequently informed by a police officer that they located her son's damaged bike on a cliff. Vicente might have fallen off the cliff and been carried away by the water. His mother, though, is adamant that he is still alive, not accepting this. The next day, Robert goes to a mental hospital to check on his daughter, but she refuses to accept that he's her father and shuts herself inside a closet. She now only works with the female nurses in the basement since she has grown afraid of all men. Meanwhile, Vicente has been subjected to torture by Robert, who has kept him shackled and denied him food and drink. Later on, Vicente is moved to a better location after Robert cleans him up and feeds him food one day. After Norma passes away in an effort to distract himself from his sorrow. So after shaving him, he takes Vicente to the operation theater to get him ready for his new experiment. Additionally, he invites another doctor and drafts a phony statement of consent to conduct Vicente's vaginoplasty. Robert intends to change Vicente into a woman. He is effectively transformed into a woman by the surgeon. Vicente freaks out the moment he realizes that he is no longer a man after the surgery. Later, when Vicente is looking in the mirror, Robert shows up and gives him the medical equipment he needs to expand his recently operated vagina. Additionally, Robert keeps an eye on him on a frequent basis and aids in his entire recovery. He admits that he kidnapped Vicente because of his sins toward his daughter. Vicente does everything as he told, in the hopes that one day Robert will release him. After a number of plastic operations, Vicente is currently known as Vera. Vicente makes an attempt to flee in the following scene after being better, but when Robert locks down the house, she tries to commit suicide. However, Robert immediately rushes her to his lab and saves her while stitching her wounds. He addresses her as Vera and claims it will be her new name. Vera then spends her time alone watching TV in a secluded room after being imprisoned there. She makes an effort to practice yoga to keep her mind. Robert then invites Morelia, who had left working at the house 4 years before. She is told not to open the door and to call him if there is ever a problem. Present day, Vera and Robert are progressively becoming more intimate. Robert seemed to be going to enjoy a typical life with Vera. Vera wandering around the house annoys Morelia, but Robert later allows Vera to go shopping with her. Morelia cautions Robert about the negative effects of releasing her, but he doesn't believe her. He thinks Vera feels the same way. Meanwhile, Vincente's mother never gives up looking for her son. She continues to print in the newspaper a picture of him who has vanished. A colleague of Robert's visits him at home to show him a newspaper that features Vicente's image. He claims Robert lied to him about Vicente's consent, and Vera appears on the scene at that very moment and defends Robert by asserting that she gave her permission for the procedure since she fell in love with him and wanted to be a lady. Robert thanks Vera for keeping him safe as the colleague leaves. Later that night, while the two are making love in bed, Vera goes downstairs saying she has brought a lubricating cream. She pulls a revolver out of a drawer and places it inside her luggage, so she obviously has other plans. Before going upstairs, she caresses the photo of her past when she used to be Vicente. Vera kisses her photo and rushes upstairs. As she arrives in the room, Vera points the gun at Robert, who becomes stunned by her unpredictable action. She then confesses that she lied about falling in love with him and shoots him to death. Downstairs, Morelia hears the gunshot and rushes to their room with revolver in her hand. Vera hides under the bed and Morelia suffers the same fate as Robert. The next day, Vera goes to her mother's boutique, where she's attended by Christina. After walking around the shop, Vera reveals her detailed story to Christina. Then, Vera shows Christina her old dress from 6 years prior to establishing her identity as Vicente. Vera tells her mother that she is her son Vicente as the movie ends. Okay, so, breaking down the story. You know it's an impressive and very smart script. This is probably the most complex, elaborate plot for a revenge movie. The fact that we have a magnificent performance by Antonio, and because of that, I was really compelled to brought my best as well. Anyway guys, just watch the movie, and have your mind bended firsthand. Thanks for watching this recap and please subscribe, like and click the notification bell so you don't miss out amazing new content. You can comment below if you have a particular movie you would like a breakdown. Also, I'm not the real Elena, I'm just an impersonator of her lovely voice.